Hi, this is Elliot Fishman, and welcome to our Facebook Live. And today is, I think, around the 29th of May, 2019. Welcome, everybody here. And hopefully everyone's enjoying the short week. I was on nights this week, so I had to work Monday also, so long days and nights. But today's my last night, so that's good. And I thought this week, we had our course a couple of weeks ago in Nashville, and I gave a talk on AI there. And one of the things was interesting that I had given my slides in about 3 weeks in advance, this part of the syllabus, but literally I gave my talk, I think, on Saturday, and there were 3 major announcements by the FDA regarding approval of radiology apps on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and I had to change my talk. And so it was a way of, even mentioning to the people in the audience how rapidly things are changing, that if you asked me to speak on Monday or Saturday, what I could tell you is a whole lot different. Now, I don't expect an announcement every day, and since I looked, there's nothing in the last week, but it does make the point that things are rapidly changing. But when I started putting my talk together and you realized what the changes are, I thought maybe it's something we could look at. And so that's why I said AI and the FDA. And when I look at it, you have to remember 2 things. We published an article in the Chew, wrote a couple of weeks ago how we're better than 90% detecting pancreatic cancer. There's an article from Special Surgery that they can read bone fractures as good as an expert radiologist or better. There's an article on Alzheimer's. There's an article from Google and people like Dave Nadich literally a week ago about talking about being able to look and triage patients with lung cancer screening. There are many, many articles. Now, of course, with wonderful results, and I'm not questioning anybody's result, but we do know that that's one center, and we also know that the challenge of bench to bedside. How do you get things in people's hands? So the best algorithms, you have to develop the software interfaces, you got to sell it, you got to make it available. It's not a trivial process, which is why, everyone doesn't form a company every week. But in saying that, I noticed that there are 2 things that the FDA is approving, and I'll be very specific on this. And what you have to remember is, and maybe it's a good strategy from the company's perspective, but also the FDA dictates that they're going to give things with very narrow claims. Now remember, with the FDA, you can't say I'm detecting fractures. You got to say, what fractures are you detecting? So for example, a few months ago, there was a product that was approved for detecting radial fractures, not fractures of the carpal bones and not fractures of the fingers and not the elbow, shoulder, knee, and any place else. It was radial fractures. Now, in this case, they weren't saying they were better than a radiologist, but they were saying they were better than an ER doc or an orthopod or someone without that much experience reading films. And so they looked at it as a way of improving the accuracy till someone official read the films. And so in the ER setting in many small hospitals, or 3 o'clock in the morning in many large hospitals, there's no one around. And if the ER doc, before he calls the orthopod, wants to know there's a fracture present and is not sure, it would be great if this software could help. Not very tricky. Again, not very threatening for the radiologist, because it's saying that you need an expert radiologist, because this is in the 80-ish to 90% accurate. It's not perfect by any means. Not that we're perfect, but it does take a major step forward. So think about that, and I think you're going to see that happening. There'll be something coming along for C-spine and L-spine and T-spine and knees and ankles, and that same company is surely working on other things. And they said they weren't very good at the elbows and the shoulders, but you can imagine they're working on it. So perhaps you're going to see joint by joint, okay? Let's put that aside. The thing that was most interesting to me, or more interesting, was AI Doc came out a few months ago with a software package that detects blood on brain CTs. Now, what it does is, and it's somewhat brilliant, bleeds you want to detect early, obviously, so you can manage the patient's early. Time is brain, right? So, and you have a lot of things at night where it's big ER companies that are reading the studies, the Facebook. So we have to, hi, I don't know what happened on Facebook Live, but so just saying that the big trend from the FDA now is this idea about triage. So with the brain bleeds, AI Doc has a program that will move it to the front of your list. So just think about that. You're going to read it anyway. If it overcalls it, so what? You have to read it anyway. And I was told that it saves about 35 to 40 minutes on a case. That's spectacular because there's no downside. There was then another program approved by the FDA a couple of weeks ago that looks for pneumothoraces on chest x-rays. And you think about it, it's the same idea. If it has a pneumothorax, then you move it to the front of the list. You read it right away. Again, I'm sure it's trained, and I don't have all the details, to overcall because you don't want to undercall. If you call, I'm just picking a number, 20% too many, so what? I got to read the case anyway. It's just going to help with patient care because it's going to make us more efficient by triaging better. The same thing was a new program for detecting PEs. It looks at the chest CTs. If it sees a PE, moves it to the front of the list, so you have to read it right away. So what you can see is there's a theme here. And I think that's what you're going to see in the short term. It's not going to be a program that says, we read PEs, or we read pneumothoraces, or we read brain bleeds. It's saying we're really good at detecting something to help triage the process. Now, in some ways, you can argue this is a Trojan horse, right? It's now going to get us into AI. So the good thing is, I think people are afraid of AI. This won't be too threatening because it's not putting you out of a job in the short term, right? It's just making you think about what's going on in that process. So that idea is really good. And then you'll get used to it, and perhaps surely it's going to get better. And you could say, well, long term, will it be the thing to read all the brain bleeds and you just be signing off on them? That's very possible, but that'll take thousands of more cases and time. But in the short term, the triage is brilliant. The same thing with pneumothoraces. Now, there's also in that realm, there was an article from the National Health System in London. They work with DeepMind, which is Google. And there was an article about how they're backed up on their imaging studies and surely chest x-rays by more than 6 months. That's horrendous, right? Can you imagine you have something bad and you don't know about it for 6 months? Well, they're short of radiologists. So what Google is doing with DeepMind is you're being able to separate normal from abnormal. So if you think about it, if you have 25,000 chest x-rays to read and you only have the capability of reading 2,500, but if the computer told you, look at these 2,500 because the other ones are negative, that's somewhat brilliant, right? Because you can be really efficient. And as things get better, in the future, perhaps that's how it's going to be done. You'll read the abnormals, the computer will read the normals. You can think about in third world countries or countries with limited resources. I read some countries in Africa have like one radiologist or maybe two radiologists. They can't read all the stuff. So what you'd like to do is have triage separate what needs to be read from what probably is normal, and you can wait to get to it. And then long term, of course, the next step will be normal, abnormal, where the normals, nobody will ever read. You'll go straight out from the computer normal, and then you'll be reading with a little bit of AI assistance, the abnormal. So you have to think about it, that how is it the transition? The transition, and again, ER is the perfect place for this because you're trying to triage, and also the big companies involved, they're reading thousands of cases, is the perfect triage. It goes back to the old Paul Berger with when he first started the remote reading in Australia. But it's that idea of triaging what's important now and doing better patient care. I think it's again, the strategy. You can imagine wrist fracture, you can imagine PE, read it first. The future will be the computer reads the PE. Maybe you'll get great at it with time. So I don't think where we're going to be 10 years from now or 5 years from now is where we're going to be here. But I think as you think about things, that's how your first interaction with AI is going to be. It's going to be with triage, non-threatening, increased efficiency, better throughput perhaps, but surely better patient care. And I think that's going to drive acceptance. And you would want that in your own hospital. So we'll have to see when the studies come out looking at that. When it documents efficiency, Then, of course, there's a cost involved, all the usual things, but it could be very, very cost efficient on individual patients. So that'll be really good. And of course, we'll look at who pays for it. Those are issues that are beyond this talk, and it may be a talk for a different time. But I think pay attention now, and we're going to put an article together about this. And there's a talk on CTisus. I think our talk this coming Monday will be on this topic, where I'll give you all the references and everything else about these approvals. And again, this is really the first step of AI in radiology, the screening, the triaging mode. And of course, the far end is when it reads the study, and all we're doing is watching it read the study, perhaps. So it's going to be a long pathway, but it's something you need to be thinking about. And I think it's really good. And I'm sure for the next couple of years, the way that the FDA is going to work on these things is triage, which needs less accuracy. Then it will be more help the radiologist second reader type thing, where it's really good, but it's not perfect. And the two of you together, maybe you'll be perfect. And the third step, of course, will be computer only. And we don't know when that's going to be, if that'll ever be. So with that, I'll be happy to answer questions. Let me see. If anyone has any questions, I can see them on Facebook much easier than I can on Instagram, but I'm looking at the Instagram. So if anyone has a question, this is probably a good time to ask it. And as I said, I apologize for those of you who are on Facebook. For some reason or other, it said we were disconnected from the internet. I don't know, it was North Korea, Iran, Iraq, or someone forgot to pay the electric bills at Hopkins. It's one of those four, or maybe there's some other possibilities that we could all think about. Well, I have no questions. So again, take a listen to our talk next week on Monday. And if you have any questions then, we'll keep up the dialogue. Also, I'll tell you that some of you know this, but on CTisus, on our front page now, we have a major area we're developing on AI with lectures and articles, things that are from the medical literature, and then also articles from the lay press, from things like Wired and Fortune and all these different computer journals, MIT, Harvard, and the like. So we have that information there. We have cases, we have pearls, lots of really good stuff. And as AI develops at CTisus, we plan on being at the front end and helping you navigate which things that may be very treacherous waters. So with that, I thank everybody for their attention. Oh, here's the thing. You mentioned using AI for countries that have few radiologists. You think that would be possible since they have no money to actually assess AI? Well, you know that in some of the countries, like in Africa, Facebook and Google are giving them free internet connectivity. So, you know, Google's been working on like the balloons that can provide AI services. They used that, in fact, in Puerto Rico after they had that terrible hurricane. So you can imagine if you have Google and Facebook giving free AI to the country, now you have connectivity. Now, of course, you need X-ray machines or CT scanners. And I think countries are getting some of those. China's been supporting some countries, giving them equipment. Cuba did that for a while in South America. But even if you have equipment, unless someone reads the study, obviously, it doesn't work. So I think it can be helpful in that regard. And I could just imagine, you know, you have a country like Ghana. I think Ghana is the one I read that has 2 radiologists. Well, what do you do with all of the films you have? And so this may be a really good way of triaging. If you could just separate the normal from the abnormals, that'll go a great way in making people more efficient. So I think it's going to help. But obviously, if you don't have any resources, it's hard to imagine. But I think if you look at some of the work now on diabetic retinopathy, you look at some of the work on some of the different bloodborne diseases, you are seeing that the countries that will benefit most in the short term are resource-poor countries like India with the diabetic retinopathy. They can screen thousands of patients a day with 100% accuracy where they could not do that before. So that's very exciting. Now, someone says, what does AI stand for? Artificial intelligence is the answer. And then there's John Biacchino, who's across the street in PED-CT. How's it going there, John? It looks like I'm going to run out of questions right there. So with that, I thank everybody for their attention, and have a great day.